Everyone was warmly wrapped up against the cold, with overnight leaders Neil Woolrich and Kenny Scholthammer waiting to get proceedings underway in the factory Mitsubishi Pajero. There was time for a last-minute consultation between Woolrich and a member of the Mitsubishi service crew before the overall race leaders were flagged away. With a healthy overnight lead, the name of the game for Woolrich and Scholthammer would be to conserve the Pajero and try and control the pace from the front. It was up to other crews to do the chasing and take the risks. Some early morning condensation was a minor irritation for the Pajero crew, while back at the start, special vehicle leaders Mark Corbett and Juan Moore were also under starters' orders in the Jimco. Right behind them were Greg Harvey and Boy Stone in the Queen Motorspares Castrol Jimco, with the pair delighted with the performance of a car that for the first time was running on a manual gearbox. For the front runners and those doing the chasing in the various categories, there were some interesting tactical permutations to be considered. The Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser pair of Arpi Reinecker and Robin Houghton were looking a little pensive at the start. They had a double problem, and that they'd ground to make up on Woolrich and Scholthammer, and were themselves under pressure from the impressive Cliff Wiechelt and Johan Smelberger in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser. The fact that they were carrying official Toyota hopes on the desert race put a little extra pressure on Reinecker and Houghton. In only their second season in off-road racing, Wiechelt and Smelberger were proving to be something of a handful for more established crews. The distinctive yellow Toyota Land Cruiser hounded Reinecker and Houghton throughout day one, and the scrap between the Toyota entries was one of the more enticing tidbits offered on day two. Behind the two Land Cruisers, the third car away in the special vehicle category was the Cornbake Foods Jimco, in the hands of Shamir Variawa and Bucks Carolyn. Chasing after the Jimco was Class B overnight leader Marius Beaurain, who was back in harness after taking a sabbatical for a season or two. Race cam action from the Mitsubishi cult of Class D leaders Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan, who were under pressure from a number of quarters. Better known as a rally driver, the talented Kuhn has taken to off-road racing like a duck to water. But the Class D leaders were under attack from Hannes Hrobler and Richard Leek in the factory Nissan, running in Class T. Although running in Class T, the Hrobler-Leek Nissan is near standard, with the pair picking up points while they wait for a state-of-the-art vehicle to come out of the Nissan workshop. Also involved in an interesting early days 2 scrap were two Toyota Land Cruiser crews. The father and son combination of Schumi and Karl van Vuren were trying to close in on Hrobler and Leek, and were in turn being chased by Pete Haasbroek and Christo Bosch. Tagged on at the end of this little group were Nars LaRue and Henny Terstegen in the second Mitsubishi Colt, and not far behind them were Class E leaders Jean-Pierre Joubert and Errol Hodgson in the Toyota Hilux. Still running at the front of the quad category was Mark Breckel on the Brasco refrigeration Yamaha. Riders are taking a pounding from the thorn bushes, with Breckel under attack from Brendan Bartenhorst on the CJ Yamaha. The thick sand and difficulty with route markings were also proving to be a handful for the quad competitors, who were having a tough time of it. Behind the two front-runners, Paul Chomsa was going along steadily on the Answer FMF Racing Yamaha, but looming up behind him was a determined Jacques Struwik, who was looking for his first national championship win on the Answer FMF Yamaha. With the trademark flag fluttering from the back of the quad, Struwik was picking up the pace and had Chomsa in his sights. While the quads went their merry way, there were problems for Mitsubishi Pajero pair Friki Buerta and Veal scribe Elza Tiart, who would eventually be classified as the last crew home. Buerta and Tiart were still stranded when bike leader Daryl Curtis blasted past them on the AGA LG Castrol KTM. Curtis took control of proceedings when pre-race favourite Alfie Cox dropped out on day one and was belting along as though there were no tomorrow. It was also full speed ahead for 250 class leader Elmer Simons on another of the AGA LG Castrol KTM entries, and veteran Jeremy Davies, who was charging up the open category leaderboard on another KTM. Also going well was Jay Goodseats, who was second in the 250 class on the Miller Moore Honda Racing entry, while behind him the Russell Campbell Racing Kawasaki, ridden by Wayne Farmer, had moved into the lead in the 200 category. We'll be back with more Mud, Sweat and Gears from the Toyota 1000 Desert Race. Welcome back for more Mud, Sweat and Gears from the Toyota 1000 Desert Race. There was an advance guard waiting for overall leaders Neil Woolrich and Kenny Schulthammer when the pair arrived at the designated service point. As has become the norm for the pair on recent events, they bypassed the service area and just kept going. The ploy, made possible by an enlarged fuel tank, saved the Mitsubishi Pajero pair valuable time and entrenched their lead. Behind the Pajero, the first of the special vehicles into the service point was the Jimco of Mark Corbett and Juan Moore, with the crew grabbing some quick refreshment while service crew went to work. Not far behind the Corbett-Moore combination were Arpi Reinecker and Robin Houghton in the Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser. The pair were still involved in a tremendous scrap with the Land Cruiser of Cliff Wiechelt and Johan Smalberger, and there was a flurry of activity around the factory entry. The object of the exercise was to get Reinecker and Houghton back on the road in the shortest possible time. Some slick work from the service crew saw Reinecker and Houghton on their way again with a minimum of lost time. While the Toyota crew rejoined the fray, there were problems for Greg Harvey and Boy Stone, who arrived at the service point with the Castrol Queen Motors Spares Jimco sporting a flat front left tyre. That led to some more frantic activity while the wheel was changed and the Jimco recharged with enough fuel to get the pair to the finish in Gaborone. More good work from service personnel quickly saw Harvey and Stone on their way with their immediate target centered around catching Corbett and Moore. Also into the service area were Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan in the Mitsubishi Colt, which was leading Class D. There to meet them were a group of Daimler Chrysler management, with Kuhn taking time out for a quick bite and a chat with his girlfriend. It was all very relaxed in the Kuhn pit, but over at the Toyota Hilux, driven by the Birkin brothers, Andrew and Chris, mechanics were busy with some running repairs. The Birkins didn't look overly concerned, with the pair leading Class E. In the quad class, Brendan Badenhorst was in front again and hurriedly gulping down liquid refreshment, while a four-legged supporter wondered what all the fuss was about. Badenhorst lost a minimum of time in the service area, and also taking in plenty of liquid was bike category leader Daryl Curtis. The AGA LG Castrol KTM rider had a healthy lead in both the overall and open class categories, but pit crew were keen to get him back on the route as quickly as possible. While Curtis went back into battle, Neil Woolrich and Kenny Schulthammer were still calmly turning the screws on the rest of the car field. They were being tracked by a helicopter flown by veteran pilot Pete Fillion, who's been on every Toyota 1000 desert race, with this year's event his swan song. Over the years, many a cameraman has had the affable Fillion to thank for the quality of his aerial shots.
The thing that stands out most in this desert rally is the sportsmanship that exists between the top class to the bottom class. It's something that you don't get anywhere. You know, I came in thinking, first of all, for argument's sake, the bike riders, a bunch of hoo-haws and so forth. But you've got to see the dedication and the professionalism and the help that they give one another. And it's inspiring. It's like a rejuvenation every year. It restores my faith in human nature.
Still trucking along at the front of the field were Neil Woolrich and Kenny Schulthammer in the Mitsubishi Pajero. Both are former motorcycle stars, and in place of numb bums and battered joints, now like to do their off-road racing in comparative comfort. The pair were now in full command, and barring the unforeseen, were heading for a comfortable victory. There were more big spectator turnouts along the Day 2 route, with Mark Corbett and Juan Moore still going strong at the front of the special vehicle field. The Jimco was also running second overall to the factory Pajero, but behind them, there was plenty of drama. In the battle raging over second and third in Class T, the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser of Cliff Wiechelt and Johan Smalberger had now moved ahead of the Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser of Arpi Reinecker and Robin Houghton. The factory Toyota pair were now a little under the whip and had no option but to charge as hard as they could and take a few chances. First priority for the pair was to regain second place from Wiechelt and Smalberger, with Reinecker starting to throw the big Land Cruiser around with gay abandon. Going along at a more sedate pace and still leading Class D were Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan in the factory Mitsubishi Colt. The pair were having their best run of the season, but stray cattle were an ever-present danger. Problems too for quad leader Brendan Badenhorst.
Are you having problems? Yeah, Brendan's box is wearing out, right?
While Brendan Badenhorst fretted over a worn sprocket, race leaders Neil Woolrich and Kenny Scholthammer were at one of the many river crossings, with another huge turnout of spectators to watch the fun and the drama. And drama there was, with Cliff Wiechelt and Johan Smelberger now second overall in the yellow Toyota Land Cruiser. The pair had moved ahead of special vehicle leaders Mark Corbett and Juan Moore in what was a thoroughly impressive performance from the comparative newcomers to off-road racing. The Land Cruiser ploughed its way through thick mud, with Corbett and Moore following in their wake in the Jimco. The crowds loved it, and charging along in fourth overall were Arpi Reinicker and Robin Houghton in the Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser. The Land Cruiser was in full sail, with Reinicker and Houghton still involved in a little game of catch-up with the cars ahead of them. Not so lucky in the mud and the slush were Shamia Variauer and Bucks Carolyn, with the Cornbake Foods Jimco getting well and truly bogged down. Rescue operations were underway when Greg Harvey and Boy Stone came along in the Castrol Queen Motorspares Jimco and moved ahead of Variauer and Carolyn in the special vehicle category. A complicated system of tow ropes, other 4x4 vehicles and some old-fashioned muscle power were now in operation, where Variauer and Carolyn were concerned. And it did the trick, with the pair finally making it onto firmer ground. The tricky conditions proved to be no problem for Hannes Hodler and Richard Leake in the BP Nissan Hardbody. The crowd was by now well and truly into the swing of things, with Class D leaders Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jordan getting an enthusiastic welcome, as they also made it through the mud with no fuss or bother. Next on the scene was the Chenoweth of the Duplessis brothers, Gerard and Lawrence. Gerard, who was now flying solo after Lawrence was forced to bail out early on day one, suffering from severe nausea. The next crew to get stuck in the mud were Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor in the Quadrishaw Land Rover. Much to the delight of the huge crowd, the mud patch then produced a kaleidoscope of entertainment. They came by car, bike or quad, and they conquered, or got stuck in the mud. With so much fun and action going on in the mud, when the midfield hordes arrived on the scene, the crowds refused to budge. A great time was being had by all, but a few competitors must have wondered where the organisers managed to find so much water and mud in the middle of Botswana in midwinter. For doughty competitors like Class B leader Giel Nel, it was all part of off-road racing.
The tracks is just getting deeper like this, also in the river beds, you know. And they run the stickers off, so you can't follow the road nicely. But we're getting there, no problem.
We'll be back with more mud, sweat and gears from the Toyota 1000 Desert Race.